Yesterday I made a video, I think it was about 20 minutes long, and that video should be coming out pretty soon, where an audience member was talking about how they see Xbox in a position where the entire shifting their games via Project Latitude to another platform seems to put PlayStation in a better position. This has been flirted with in different contexts. You guys remember the GamesIndustry.biz article where that gentleman insinuated that somewhere, somehow, PlayStation might end up in the black over Xbox when it came to Call of Duty. Now, here's the crazy thing. I decided to go ahead and continue talking about this particular reality from different perspectives. I even replied to Doc Dark's video where he was saying that PlayStation did not need to be worried about Project Latitude. But then when I pointed out that they can't do anything about it, it seems like that concern is back on the table. To that effect, an audience member said, "There's no way y'all think Xbox games are going to do any harm to PlayStation's ability to sell their own games. Y'all bout delusional AF." I replied with one simple comment, LOL, I know. Call of Duty says hello each year. Now, this is something that probably this audience member said because not many people are thinking about Call of Duty as an Xbox-owned game because, again, it's only convenient to think about it when you want to think about it, right? So a lot of people were responding, and this person said to me, LOL, name one game that Call of Duty has stopped PlayStation from selling. I'll effing wait. Okay. Now, here's the crazy thing. We have numbers of PlayStation games that have been launched on the ecosystems and have sold. And till date, the one game that I would say on the PlayStation platform that has done significantly well in terms of its individual sales, that we can probably say maybe almost rivals Call of Duty in that same fiscal year, was more than likely God of War 2022 Ragnarok. Because when you look at the numbers, you realize that Call of Duty is selling in its launch years about 14 million units on PlayStation every year. Ragnarok would have taken about 5 to 6 years to do that twice. Whereas each annual run, Call of Duty is doing every single thing. Marvel Spider-Man 2 sold 12 million units on the PlayStation 5. In the time that it had taken Insomniac to develop that game, Call of Duty had already raked in that amount annually. I put some numbers to it. And I know this is something that some people might say, oh, this might be pocket watching, or this is doing too much. Guys, sometimes I nerd out. Get the heck out of here. And so I ran some numbers. I took some data that we have from news articles. I took some stuff from Steam charts, running estimates alone. I don't have all concrete numbers, but the estimates are going to help us paint a picture. Don't go out there saying I'm giving you data that is false. This is just about estimates. A lot of people have said that we don't know how many copies Call of Duty Black Ops 6 would have sold. However, we can interpolate. I've told some people this, go interpolate. Here's where the numbers are coming from. Apparently, as of 2023, Modern Warfare 3 had already pushed the Call of Duty franchise to about 425 million copies. So the game shows up around that time, and Call of Duty had already gone to 425 million. The report is that Call of Duty was somewhere around 400 million in unit sales before Call of Duty's 2023 game. Now, as of 2024, they announced that that particular game had moved all Call of Duty's total sales to over 500 million units. That's how we basically can pull, say, some estimated numbers. So from 425 to 500 and 2 Call of Duty games in between, that's about 75 million units. I decided I was going to go a conservative route and give Call of Duty Black Ops 6 30 million units. That's what I did. Then I multiplied 30 million by $60 base. There's the $100 version. There's the $80 version. I just went with $60. And then I said for PlayStation, about 50% of that revenue would have come from PlayStation. How did I get that 50% revenue? Well, I went online and I looked and said, Call of Duty players on PlayStation. Apparently, we have some data from, I think, around the FTC leaks that in 2021, over 14 million PlayStation users spent at least 30% of their time playing Call of Duty. This number could be higher. I just took it as an estimate and said, all right, let's just say when it launches, bam, half of all the sales come from PlayStation, right? And so that's what I did here. Then, because Xbox is selling at 50% the rate of PlayStation units, I gave Xbox half, and so that's its revenue. Then I gave Steam half of Xbox and gave Battle.net half of Xbox. That's how I came up with my totals in this estimate. When I ran all the numbers, I gave PlayStation its 30%. PlayStation comes home with $270 million right off the bat in terms of sales. Then, in the same right, Xbox comes home with $630 million from PlayStation for Call of Duty. Add Xbox's revenue at 100%, add Steam's revenue at 30%, and add PC, Battle.net, and maybe Xbox's PC platform at 100%, Xbox comes home in revenue with $625 billion. Got it? These are estimates. So I decided, well, 270 million looks really weird. And so I started looking weird. And I remember PlayStation had said something about Call of Duty basically being worth about $800 million to PlayStation alone. So I said, all right, let's go ahead and get that $800 million in annual revenue from Call of Duty for PlayStation. What would the remaining 70% be? So I went ahead and I asked ChatGPT, if 800 million is 30% of a number, and then, and I said, what is 70% of that number and what is that number? That number is basically $2.67 billion, and Xbox would have held 70% of that number at $1.87 billion. So from PlayStation alone, Xbox is making around $1.8 billion. That is not including its potential 30% on Steam and 100% on PC and 100% on Xbox. This franchise is at least a $3 billion franchise for Xbox every given year. This is why when they acquired Activision, their points went up and their revenue grew like crazy. Now, here's the interesting part. Remember, when Xbox did not own Activision, their revenue would have only been relegated to about 30% of maybe this particular number, which is abysmal if you think about it, which is basically, in this case, $450 million. And the revenue that they would have been getting will be somewhere around, maybe 120 million is what they would have been getting from COD. Or if we take that, number here and get the 30% of it, and then just slash it by, 2, they would have been getting in total $400 million from Call of Duty, because if PlayStation was getting 800 million, then I would just estimate that they were getting half of that at 400 million. They went from 400 million to almost $3 billion in revenue. This is why PlayStation said, Jim Ryan said, that if they were to give PlayStation a devalued version of Call of Duty, their business will never remain the same. That's where I think this entire FTC debacle had to pretty much come into perspective, and Jim Ryan had to try all he could to block the deal from going through. Now, anybody who's telling me that this $800 million is free and clear for PlayStation and, cost for Xbox, within the almost $3 billion that Call of Duty would make from one franchise, it might make it over the course of a year. You can already say that cost will be satisfied and there will be profits that come from it, because this game alone is carrying all of the deficits that Xbox has been seeing all these years. Now, keep in mind, I didn't even add subscription revenue, guys. I didn't even find, there's nowhere I can find it. And if at any rate Call of Duty brought in, say, even 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 new subscribers to Game Pass who wanted to play it, then that is also extra revenue at 100% for Xbox. Now, check this out. Do this for every other game that is coming from Xbox to the PlayStation, and even games that already exist on PlayStation. Right? Minecraft, Overwatch 2, and then the games that have basically been announced. Age of Myth, I put at 1 million because I thought Sea of Thieves, that sold about 1 million units. Age of Empires, I put about 1 million. Forza 5, I put about 1 million. Indiana Jones, I put in a weird category because they're going to have to pay extra fees on this to Lucas Games. And then Outer Worlds is their game, 100%. Doom, I put 5 million because of the numbers that we have. Now, it could be somewhere around 3 million to be very, very fair. I mean, after it's all said and done. But PC is also going to carry. I'm just using PlayStation as like the biggest seller of these Xbox games when it comes down to it, even though Steam might match any of these games at any given time. You cannot, in good faith, tell me that this market pressure frees people to just go buy these PlayStation games. Every single year, Xbox is farming PlayStation players for billions of dollars of revenue and intend to farm them more. Do you think that people are going to go ahead and look at Marvel Spider-Man at $60 each year and look at Call of Duty at $60 and many more of them are going to pick Marvel Spider-Man 3? No, they're going to pick Call of Duty. How do we know? Every single year or every single cycle that we see the games they're playing the most of, we see them playing Call of Duty every time. We see them playing Minecraft every single time. They're spending their money in these time sucks. So if you're wondering which game will hamper PlayStation's own capability to sell, it's these games, of which Xbox has a number of them. And ladies and gentlemen, we're not even looking at, Warzone. We're not looking at old Call of Duties. We're not looking at all of these other titles that have already basically flooded the PlayStation ecosystem. This is why Astrobot sold 1.5 million units. You are saying this, Combat Matter, like you have not been here. And I asked some of you PlayStation fans when Astrobot won Game of the Year. I said, did you buy it? Many of them were like, no, we didn't buy it. Like, they were heckling me in the comment section, but they didn't buy Astrobot. So again, you have to look at the PlayStation player's behavior and realize that the PlayStation player is much more geared towards the live service games. If the numbers at this point cannot convince you, then I don't know what else will. However, the reality still stands where it is. Because even if I answered a comment yesterday. This was a very interesting one. And sorry about the yelling. We got a lot of kids in the house. I don't know why they're acting out. And that particular comment was very funny because that audience member said something along the lines of, VG, they still have research and development. They still have to pay Activision Blizzard King all this money, pay Microsoft all this money that they, spend from Activision Blizzard and all that stuff. And I was laughing because I was saying to myself, you have not calculated the amount of money that they bring in, and you underestimate the revenue and overestimate all of the cost. If the cost was that big, right? If the cost was really, really that big, Activision would not have been one of the most profitable, publishers out there before they were acquired. They were simply one of the biggest juggernauts in terms of that revenue each year. And everybody was making money from them. Now, PlayStation has lost an advantage here. Not just the fact that Xbox is now basically holding on to majority of the revenue, but there's no longer a special version for PlayStation that gave them and netted them more revenue. Ladies and gentlemen, if you think about it, you really have to go ahead and say, okay, at some point, y'all have to actually see why PlayStation was concerned when they decided to acquire this particular, publisher. It's that simple. And if they continue this trend and continue this pattern, they sit on all this money. So here's another answer for you. For those of you who've been saying and asking if Game Pass was sustainable, this is how Game Pass will not just be sustainable, but will thrive. Not just on Activision Blizzard King's dollars from Call of Duty, but also revenue from every other game that has been coming on multiple platforms. This is it right here. The multi-platform strategy for Xbox is exactly where their money is. This is why PlayStation was freaking out when they were talking about their multi-pronged approach, because it dampens almost any kinds of losses that they can get from their games. If Astrobot sold 1.4 million units and Indiana Jones sold 1.4 million units, Indiana Jones has the potential to come in here and farm more revenue from PlayStation to make up for any potential losses or any lack of revenue. In fact, in the case of Forza 5, Age of Empires, Age of Mythology, These games have already clocked their base cost. And so them coming to PlayStation is extra revenue for Xbox on top of it. Sure, PlayStation may make some money, but they are now going to establish Forza 5 as an entire platform in terms of multiplayer racing on the PlayStation platform. They're going to establish Age of Mythology, Age of Empires as another multi-platform live service game on the PlayStation ecosystem. And this revenue is going to be recurring just as they did with Sea of Thieves. So if you guys are not paying attention to what's going on, I guarantee you're missing the entire plot. Because if you think that this is some kind of a capitulation, no, this is them adapting to the new market and the new strategy. Again, this is why PlayStation is looking for a live service game. They want a live service game that's going to do this for them. And they still are yet to find anything more than Helldivers 2, which they themselves tried to hamstring. They region lock their games. How can they be successful on PC? And this is where the problem is. This is where the rub is for them. Now, I don't know if Xbox region locks their games, but I doubt it. I mean, especially having acquired Activision and acquired Minecraft. If these games had no region lock, then it's basically free for all. Where more people who would say, well, if I can't play a PlayStation game because it's region locked, I might as well go play a game that's available to me. And I sure as heck, I'm not going to go buy a PlayStation console to play a live service game. How many Xbox users jumped and bought a PlayStation console to play Helldivers 2? I haven't seen a single person. Now, I'm not saying I know every Xbox player's, decision making, but there's not the Xbox player that has said, yeah, I went and bought a PlayStation because I wanted to play Helldivers 2. They just dialed into the live service games that were already available to them. All right, let's jump in the comment section. Let's do some analysis. If I missed out anything, let me know. Again, these were all estimates. Don't come out here telling me, oh, your data is wrong. Get the heck out of here. Peace out.